This video is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc. If you're looking for cards in the US, look no further as you can use the promo code MTGMudsta to get you 5% off anything on the site. Or if you're in Canada like me, you can use the same promo code at Multizone to get 10% off your orders of singles. If cards aren't what you're looking for, Original Magic Art has playmats, tokens, and sweet art that you can use that same promo code to help you get 5% off your order there. If you're looking to bling out your cards, using Alter Sleeves is a great way to do so, and you can click the affiliate link in my About section to help out the channel as you make an order. And if you just want to help out the channel, you can always consider becoming a patron for as little as $1 a month and join the generic Goblin Gang. Hey gang, and welcome back. Today's game is brought to you by the Jersey Boys, and Trevor is playing Zurgo Helmsmasher, keeping Command Tower, Plains, Archangel Avacyn, Batterskull, Heliod's Intervention, Solemn Simulacrum, and a Dragonskull Summit. Harry is playing Extus, Auric Overlord, keeping Battlefield Forge, Sulphurous Springs, Path to Exile, Austere Command, Sun-Baked Canyon, Talisman of Hierarchy, and a Reviarch. Frank is playing Yarok the Desecrated, keeping Heroic Intervention, Breeding Pool, Prismatic Vista, Springbloom Druid, Baleful Strix, Forest, and a Coiling Oracle. Matt has brought out Bosh EDH, keeping Saheeli's Directive, Metalworker, Cloud Key, Duplicant, Two Mountains, and Forgotten Cave. Trevor wins the die roll and starts us off. He plays a tapped Dragonskull Summit and passes. Matt draws and plays a mountain. Frank plays a tapped Breeding Pool, passing to Harry. Harry draws and plays a Battlefield Forge. Trevor plays a Plains and passes. Matt draws and plays a mountain. Frank plays a forest and casts a Dimir Signet. Harry plays out Sulphurous Springs and taps 2 for a Talisman of Hierarchy. Trevor plays an Isolated Chapel and then taps 3 for a Mirage Mirror. Matt draws and plays a tap Forgotten Cave. Frank draws and plays a Prismatic Vista, cracking it and losing 1 to go and find a swamp. He then casts a Coiling Oracle, and reveals a Reliquary Tower off the top, putting it into play. He then casts a Baleful Strix, drawing a card as it enters, and passing. Harry plays a Snow-Covered Mountain, and then bolts himself with his mana base to cast his commander. Trevor draws and plays a Command Tower, tapping 4 to go cast a Solemn Simulacrum, who upon entering, finds him a swamp, and Trevor passes. Matt plays a Zalfrin Void, scrying 1 and bottoming it. He then casts a Cloud Key, naming artifacts, and follows up with a free Flayer Husk. While Harry is busy showing off his sweet Japanese Legion foil Phage. With nothing else, Matt passes turn. Frank draws and plays a forest. He casts Yarok and follows up with the Birds of Paradise and passes to Harry. Harry draws and plays a Sun-Baked Canyon. He casts a Sedmore Witch, taking 1 off his mana base because pain is gain, and passes to Trevor. Trevor just plays a tap Sabai Triome and passes. Matt draws and casts an Ichor Wellspring, drawing a card, and then plays an Urza's Mine. He then pays enough mana for a Metalworker and passes to Frank. Frank casts a Ravenous Chupacabra, getting 2 triggers thanks to Yarok as it enters. He targets the Metalworker and Extus. And Harry responds by casting a Flawless Maneuver, making a Pest token off the Sedmore Witch. Moving to combat, Frank then swings 1 at Harry with the Baleful Strix and passes. Harry draws and plays a Bojuka Bog, exiling Matt's graveyard as it enters. He then moves to his end step, and at the end of turn, Trevor casts Heliod's Intervention, destroying Harry's Talisman, Frank's Signet, and Matt's Cloud Key. Trevor takes his turn and draws. He plays a Castle Locthwain and then casts a Batterskull. Matt plays a Mountain and casts a Duplicant and targets Yarok as it enters. Frank responds by casting Heroic Intervention and protects his commander, and with nothing else, Matt passes. Frank draws and then plays a Springbloom Druid. He sacrifices some lands to go and get 4 more, and then casts a Spellseeker. Harry responds to this with it on the stack by using Path to Exile on Yarok, and gives Frank another land, but thankfully only 1 Spellseeker trigger. Frank finds a Cyclonic Rift and passes to Harry. Harry draws and plays a Fabled Passage, cracking it to go and find a Snow-Covered Plains. Trevor draws and swings the Batterskull at Matt for 4, gaining 4. He then plays an Arid Mesa and passes turn. Matt plays a Mountain before casting Saheeli's Directive, where X is 7. He gets to keep a Mind Stone, Dreamstone Hedron, and a Combustible Gearhulk. With the Gearhulk entering, Matt chooses Frank for the trigger. Frank opts for Matt to mill the cards, and as a result, Frank takes 7 from the Staff of Domination, Junk Diver, and Mana Vault getting milled. With nothing else, Matt passes. Frank recasts his commander in his main phase, and passes to Harry. Harry plays a Temple of Triumph, scrying 1 and bottoming it. He then casts an Austere Command, losing 1 for his Painful Mana, and names little and big creatures. Trevor responds by flashing in an Archangel Avacyn to save his board, and the spell then resolves with Harry gaining 2 off the Peth's dying. With nothing else, he passes turn. Trevor cracks his Arid Mesa at the end of Terry's turn, and goes to get a Plateau before drawing for turn. He then plays his own copy of Bojuka Bog, and targets Matt before playing a Chandra Torch of Defiance. Trevor upticks her, hitting a Combustible Gearhulk, and leaves her in exile, dealing 2 to the table. Moving to combat, he swings everything at Frank for 10. Trevor gains 4, and with nothing else, he passes to Matt. Matt draws and plays a Mountain, and then brings out Bosh Iron Golem. Frank plays a Growing Rites of Itlamok, revealing a Deadeye Navigator off the trigger, and passing to Harry. Harry draws for turn, and in his main phase, cracks the Sunbaked Canyon to draw a card. He then casts a Solemn Simulacrum, going to find a Snow-Covered Swamp, and passes. Trevor draws and upticks Chandra once more, revealing Decree of Pain, which he opts not to cast, and deals 2 to everyone again. Moving to combat, Trevor swings the Solemn at Frank, Avacyn at Matt, and the Batterskull at Harry. Harry blocks with the Solemn, and the rest of the table just take their hits, with Trevor gaining 4. With nothing else, he passes. Matt plays a Mountain, before throwing the Ichor Wellspring at Chandra to deal 2 with Bosh, and draws a card as the artifact is sacrificed. With nothing else, Matt passes. Frank recasts Yarok a 3rd time, and passes to Harry. Harry plays a Clifftop Retreat, and then casts a non-evoked Reveillark, and follows up with a Blood Artist. At the end of turn, Trevor activates Cathal Lochwain to draw a card and lose 3 life, and then takes his turn. Trevor draws, and in his main phase, upticks Chandra once more, hitting a scrub land and keeping it in exile to deal 2 to the table. He then casts a Stoneforge Mystic, and gets to tutor for a Sword of Fire and Ice, which he puts to hand, and then casts. He then plays a Strip Mine, and pays to equip the sword onto the Batterskull Germ, and goes to combat. He swings Avacyn at Matt for 4, and Frank with the Germ token for 6. Matt cracks his Dreamstone Hedron to draw 3, and they then take their damage, with Trevor gaining 6. Trevor also gets a Sword Trigger, and he has the damage to take out the Blood Artist, with Harry draining Trevor for 1 as it dies. With nothing else, he passes to Matt. Matt draws and plays a Mountain, and then casts a Mycosynth Lattice. This allows him to cast a free Metalwork Colossus, and Matt then moves to his end step, while Trevor uses Strip Mine to take out Frank's Breeding Pool before he untaps. Frank draws for turn, and in his main phase casts Languish. This has Harry's Reveillark dying, which gets back his Exodus and his Solemn, while most of Trevor's board gets wiped. Frank then plays a Panharmonicon, and passes to Harry. Harry draws and plays an Isolated Chapel, casting a Worthy Cause with a buyback in his main phase. This gains him 2, and he sacrifices the Solemn, and from casting a spell, gets an Extus trigger, returning Reviark to his hand. He then recasts the Reviark, and follows up with the Zulaport Cutthroat, and passes to Trevor. Trevor draws, and plays a tapped Temple of Malice, scrying 1 and bottoming it. He upticks Chandra once more, and he actually decides to cast it this time as it's an Enlightened Tutor. He goes to find a Sword of Sinew and Steel, and puts it on top, and goes to combat. Trevor swings the Germ at Frank for 6, and gains 6, and uses the sword trigger to take Frank out. Post-combat, Trevor overloads a Wind of Abandon, and Matt responds by throwing the Metalwork Colossus at Trevor for 11. Harry's Reviark leaving the battlefield gets back the Solemn Simulacrum and Blood Artist, and with nothing else, Trevor passes as his opponents go to find the lands. At Trevor's end step, Matt sacrifices his Alphorn Void and Flare Husk to return a Metalwork Colossus to his hand because of the Mycosynth Lattice making them artifacts. Matt draws and plays a Mountain. He casts a Mana Geyser for 22 red mana and recasts Bosh, and follows up with the Metalwork Colossus as well as a Wormcoil Engine. He then flings the Colossus at Trevor for another 11, and sacrifices 2 lands to recast the Colossus to fling at Trevor again for a total of 22 so far. There are also 2 Blood Artist triggers at this point, which Harry has drained Trevor for 1 each. Matt then sacrifices 2 more lands to bring back the Colossus a 3rd time and recasts it before casting a Voltaic Construct. With nothing else, he passes to Harry. Harry draws and recasts his Commander. Once that's done, he plays a Living Lightning and passes to Trevor. Trevor upticks Chandra in his main phase, revealing a Stonehewer Giant, which he decides to cast. He then moves to combat, swinging the Germ at Harry this time, who blocks with a Solemn Simulacrum. Harry gets to draw from it dying, and gets a Blood Artist trigger, which he uses to drain Trevor for 1. Matt plays a Blinkmoth Nexus, and moves to combat, swinging the Wormcoil Engine at Harry, who blocks with the Living Lightning. Harry then sacrifices it to a worthy cause with buyback again, draining Matt with the Blood Artist trigger, and gaining 3 total. With nothing else, Matt passes. Harry draws, and sacrifices Blood Artist to Diabolic Intent, and he gets an Extus trigger from casting a spell, returning the Blood Artist to hand. Trevor gets drained for 1 with the Blood Artist dying trigger, while Harry goes to grab a Dockside Extortionist, and he casts it. With the Goblin on the stack, Matt responds by throwing his Mycosynth Lattice at Harry to deal 6, and the Dockside then creates 6 treasures. Harry then uses Worthy Cause with buyback to sacrifice the Dockside, and returns it to his hand, and is able to loot this over and over again, always netting 1 extra treasure. Harry then plays a Blood Artist to attempt to drain the table immediately, but Trevor responds by targeting the Blood Artist with a Mirage Mirror to negate the drain at least on him. However, Harry is ready with this, and casts a Dark Blast on the Mirage Mirrored Blood Artist to stop Trevor's stalemate, and the game wins in combo. Game review time. So I thought that was pretty sweet how Trevor was able to use that Mirage Mirror to hopefully keep Harry off his combo. Unfortunately, Harry was ready for it, but I thought it was a particularly sweet line of play. I was also a big fan of Matt's Metalwork Colossus, and being able to fling giant amounts of damage at people with Bosh seems super sweet, and the Mycosynth Lattice being out meant that his lands could become fodder to help put it back to his hand. Frank likes to build very good value engine decks, and Yarok is no exception. I think that as soon as they saw that Deadeye Navigator go to his hand, people knew they had to stop him or he was going to very quickly grind out value into a win. Harry's Extus deck was pretty sweet, and I love seeing Mardu spell-slinging based decks. I particularly enjoy the fact that Worthy Cause, a card that I've seen before in the past but never really given much thought to, was such an integral part of Harry's win condition. This video wouldn't be possible without the help from my sponsors, Cool Stuff Inc., Multizone, Original Magic Art, and Alter Sleeves. But it definitely wouldn't be possible without the help from you, the viewers, and my patrons. So I just want to say thank you for watching, and to remember, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.